Hey, welcome back to the channel. Good morning. We have a little project here, a little emergency situation. Not really too bad, but what happened was King Lou ran through this screen this morning and we're gonna have to go ahead and repair it. Simple repair. Here's some of the tools that we are gonna use in order to go ahead and do that. Right here we are gonna use, all you need is side cutters, a screwdriver small, a spline roller, and of course spline, and that is in that's 0.220, the spline. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and start the repair. The first thing we're probably going to want to do is the top, because that's the easiest. The bottom is still in, the whole spline for the top pulled out. Now this is smaller spline. This happens to be, I forget what number, but it's not quite as tight. You want to use the thickest spline that will fit in here to go ahead and keep it tight. So I'm going to grab the spline roller and I'm going to grab the spline, and basically I'm going to have to use two hands here, and I'm going to start it right where it is. I'm not going to pull out the old spline over there yet. I want to get this started, and sometimes it's a little difficult to get that in there, but once you get it in there, once you get it started, you can normally get the spline in there pretty well. Again, this is a little bit tough because it's the top portion of a repair. If you were putting in the screen new, you would probably have the top in before the bottom. So as you can see, you got to put a little pressure on to get that started, and you just kind of roll the spline along. Just go nice and slow, and it's actually not going all the way in, but I'm gonna go back over it once I get a little bit, or maybe the whole thing started, because it's tough doing it just with two hands. Just slowly pushing it in. You can see I'm slipping a little bit. You got to be really careful of that, because you don't want to slip and go right through the screen. And then once we get this top one in, what I'll do is I'll replace all the other spline also with the larger spline, so it will stay a little bit tighter. And I know King Lou is feeling bad about it, but it's a fairly easy 5-minute, 10-minute possibly for me repair. And I keep slipping, which you got to be careful of. Go a little bit at a time. Sometimes if you stretch it a little bit and give her a little bit of a push, it goes in a lot easier. Again, if it goes in too easy, then you're not using a big enough spline, because it's not going to hold it. And kind of try and adjust your angle to make whatever. As you can see, I angled the wheel up a little bit. Seems like it may go a little easier. Stretch it out with the other hand. And usually this will tighten the screen up very nicely, except for what I just did there, which I told you not to do. And you just keep going along, stretching the spline. And again, we're just kind of getting it to set in there, and then I can go back in and make sure that it's all seated properly with the roller again. And sometimes it's easier if you have another person just to kind of stretch this. It does go in there a little bit better when you stretch it. And as I got to the end here, we could tell that as I stretched it, it goes a little bit easier. So when we get to the end, what we're going to do is we're going to just take your side cutters, kind of, it's all right if you're a little bit short, but you kind of want it to look nice to get right in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back along and make sure we get all of that seated in. This end's pretty well seated, but as you can see, it's pushing it in a little more. See, here's a spot where it's a little bit out. I'm going to try and get that to seat right in so it'll tighten up the screen very nicely. And if you do push and you end up with a little extra on the end, when you get down to the end, we can always trim that off. It's really not that big of a deal. And there's no saying that if you make a mistake, you can't pull the spline back out. You just unseat it with a little screwdriver, and you can go back along and seat it back in to that track. And of course, the screen is not completely tight yet because we still have the side portion to do after we get done with this, and we'll check the bottom also. And as we move along, it goes fairly smoothly. It's a repair that you do need to learn how to do, especially if you have dogs. Okay, and you can see the old spline has popped out completely here too, and we're going to just repeat the same process going down the sides. Get that started in, and I guess it would be up to you whether you'd rather roll up or roll down. Here I'm choosing to roll down. Not sure if that's going to work better or worse, but we're going to give her a try here. Again, if you can just kind of get it seated, you can see the screen tightening up well. You can kind of stretch it, and now that I have two hands, you can see by stretching it, it goes in there a lot easier. And then once I let go, it will expand in the spline channel. And you go right down to the bottom. And I'm going to pull that old spline all the way out. And then I'm going to grab my side cutters again and just cut off the end, and I'm going to make sure that end seats in there so we don't have any problems of it coming out. And as you can see, that's made the screen very tight, very taut, and just make sure this is all seated in again, and it should stay in there. Again, I'm using the larger spline. And there you go. That's it. It's all repaired, and we'll be on to our next project shortly. Hopefully it won't be a project with such urgency, but one that we planned out. God bless.